And the more out of touch you are emotionally, the more you are less able to feel empathy, and the less you are likely to make a decision that the weaker and the more frail of us need to be made. The more profitable the company, it's their responsibility to employ those in the community around them who are more difficult to employ. Those companies have IQ resources to figure out how to do that. They have the money in order to do that. If we manage to do it with a few hundred employees and no resources whatsoever, I promise you it's possible. It really, really is. And everybody would earn more money. The companies would earn, everybody would earn more money. I don't think you should be necessarily pushing people to succeed more at work. I think you should be pushing them to be happier. And that doesn't always align.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to be a part of the community where you can listen to more content to help you be a smarter, stronger, and better equipped, successful leader. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I would love and appreciate your support. It's amazing to me to watch the community grow and read all of your comments each and every week. I can't wait to go on the journey with you. Thank you so much, and it means the world to me. Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader Podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. Today, I'm visiting with a friend, a previous guest, Gil Winch. Gil is a PhD, a social entrepreneur and founder of CY, Call Yachol, which is a unique 100% underdog company. He shared so much about that in our last podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about why that company is unique, especially in today's world, how it serves people with either severe disabilities or, as he describes them, underdogs, people that people overlook and are amazing employees. We're also going to talk about his native country, Israel, and what's going on there and his perspective, because I'd love to be able to share that through this platform. Gil, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Being here. Thank you for having me.
So I want to dive into this, and I mentioned this earlier in the open, and you talked a little bit about workplace dynamics, and man, that's in our day in the globe today, not only with the conflict that's going on in Israel, but just the political sphere in the United States and economically throughout the world. The workplace tension is just overwhelming. I saw something today where there was a survey, and it said in the United States, 40% of people are willing to leave their job over the current political strife upcoming the election. One of the things that's changed, and I'm just setting the stage a little bit, changed, is you see a lot of large organizations that are completely doing away with DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion training. They've just completely dumped it. I'd love for you to go back in one of the segments that you wrote that I reference a lot and I loved when you wrote in Winning with Underdogs, how you view DEI, specifically when you talked about kind of like the club and the bouncer. So I'd love for you to kind of just bring us into that conversation and much what you see going on in the workplace.
So I'll try and keep it simple because it's a bit complex, but I'll try and keep it simple.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll start off by saying that I think no one will argue about the fact that if you have a certain population anywhere, and everyone who is not institutionalized in that population actually works and contributes, you would have the strongest economy possible. And if you had the same place, but only 80% of the people were working, you would have a much weaker economy because not only are 20% not working, you have to support them. It's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Right? So it seems to make perfect sense to anybody. And you don't need like a degree in economics. I think like fourth grade math or adding and subtraction will get you there. If everybody works, everybody's better off. Everybody who's not institutionalized. Now, I say that because when you ask people in various places doing various jobs, how many people are actually working out of the whole population, you'll get various answers. You can get answers of, well, we think it's like 90% because out of everybody who's looking for work, 90% found it. But not everybody is looking for work. Some people who can work aren't looking for it or have given up looking for it. So it depends really. And the true figure is all the adults who are not institutionalized, either in prison or in a hospital or in another place, who are capable of working, which is all the rest of them, should be working. Now, the thing is that some of us can pretty much do anything. And some of us cannot do anything. We can do some things for various reasons. Either we don't have the skill to do other things, or because of something to do with us or our past, we can't do certain things. For instance, ex-cons can't get accepted in certain financial institutes because they have a record and stuff like that. So following the first thing that seems to me very logical, that everybody, you should strive for everybody to work, the second part of that thinking would be, well, if there are some people who can only do some things and other people can do many more things, let's reserve the jobs for the people who can do just a few things, so the few things that they can do will be available for them, which never happens. You keep on seeing people getting offered jobs that they can't do, and they're not suited to do. And there's some obvious examples, like people who are hard of hearing, and you send them over to a call center, unless they have a cochlear implant, it's not going to work that well. And people who are legally blind, if you send them over to do micro clock fixing, that's not going to work that well either. Now, there are things that everybody can do. There's a job that anybody can do well. But if we don't keep those jobs for the people with lesser options, then we'll have the weaker economy. And I'll give you a few examples that aren't obvious. People who have Down syndrome or other cognitive things that make them less quick than others in learning new stuff. So nearly all of them are out of a job. They're nearly all out of a job. They stay in hostels all day. A funny thing, do you know what happens in the hostel when they wake up in the morning? They clean their beds, they make their rooms, they do the dishes. Now, there is such a thing I've discovered, it's called a hotel. And this establishment, and there are many of them, called hotels, have large groups of people. Do you know what they do? They clean rooms and do dishes. And coffee shops and bars have people doing dishes. If we're not going to keep those jobs for people who have lesser options, then they'll never work. We'll have the weaker economy and we'll have the weaker society. Now, lots of people who have no disability whatsoever sometimes go through a patch in life where they're weaker, they're less confident, they feel more vulnerable emotionally. And when a person in such a state needs to start a new job and join the corporate world, which is cold and sometimes cruel and very not personal, it's very difficult for people who are not having an awful lot of confidence at the moment to successfully join such a hectic, tension-ridden atmosphere. So they just don't. And in fact, the longer they stay out of a job, the more difficult it is for them emotionally to rejoin the workplace. And some people, like people with disabilities or ex-cons who are so much more unemployed than other populations, and for years stay at home, we've just incapacitated them and taken away their possibility to actually join the workforce, be amongst everyone else, be part of everyone else, and make everyone happier and stronger for it. And it's just basic logic, and it's the first thing is I don't understand how there's not one country, one town that I know of that's actually figured it out and said, let's reserve the jobs that people with lesser options need for the people with lesser options. So everybody's going to work. And the last thing about this is, do you know when life was like that? When we were living in tribes. In our past, because in tribes, you can't walk, sit here, skin the fish or the deer or whatever. Everybody's got to contribute, so everybody's a part of. But we haven't worked in tribes for at least 200 years. I mean, even 200-300 years ago, if I'm a cobbler, my father's going to be a cobbler, his grandfather is a cobbler, we're all working together. You're working within your tribe. But since the Industrial Revolution, we're leaving, we're working amongst strangers, we feel horrible. Most people feel unhappy at work. 70%, I think the stat is, emotionally, because we're not valued, we're not cared for. We're just an asset if we are anything. And that's not who we are as people. We're social people. We grew up to live to operate in a warm, caring environment. And that's where we flourish. And that's what we need for some of us to even start. And if we can't provide it, then they won't start.
So there's a question, obviously, as you're posing this dynamic situation that is prevalent most
Everywhere.
of the world, other than those tribe-centric places, right? Those tribal-centric places, probably they don't have a choice. That's what still is part of the society. Is it because of discounting the ability of people, or is it that we have this desire to underachieve?
Oh, I think it's the first, because I think that there's a sort of a paradox. The people who actually have to make the decision to reserve certain jobs are higher up in the ladder. It doesn't matter if it's the corporate ladder or the municipal ladder or the federal ladder, but they're higher up in the ladder. Thing about the ladder of the workplace ladder of success is the higher you climb, the more you lose touch with what's going on the ground below you. You don't notice you're losing touch because it's very, very gradual. It's a very, very gradual rise.
I remember in your book, Winning with Underdogs, you described it as an elevator,
good.
right?
Very good. Yes, it's like an elevator. You don't even notice it rising. And you keep on thinking that you're level and you can see everything, but you cannot. You don't feel it. And your job often demands that you don't be in touch with what's going on down there, because it'll make you maybe make a mistake in your decision making, maybe preferring the few over the many, and your job is to cater to the many. So there are many psychological mechanisms going on to make you more out of touch, and the more out of touch you are emotionally, the more you are less able to feel empathy, and the less you are likely to make a decision that the weaker and the more frail of us need to be made. So there's that going on. And there's also an awful lot of testosterone in the workplace. And it doesn't matter the gender, by the way. And the more power you have, the more you're inclined to believe that you deserve that power. You see things that others don't. So you have to make the calls. And if there's some grumbling and mumbling below you, well, they can't see what you see. So it's a dynamic that will make it very difficult to change, especially in companies that presume maximum profit, which I don't think you should, because if you're going to go for maximum profit, then you're not responsible for anything else.
Well, it's not always sustainable, right?
You're just taking care of your shareholders, and you're not really taking care of them. You're just taking care of their current monetary needs, but you're knocking off their future generations' chance of having an ecosphere that they can live in, or a happy life, or whatever. So, yeah.
So, as you've worked within your own call center, and when you've worked within your, organizational structure, how have you worked to balance that, reserve jobs for certain people, and also, for people that are more able, encourage them to say, hey, don't sell yourself short, meaning I want this lower end job because I'm comfortable there. It's like, no, but you're able to do far more. How do you balance that, or how do you encourage them to do more than maybe what they're accepting for themselves?
Okay, so the first part of the question is that when we interview people, we don't think like, is that person a good fit for what we need? When we interview people, we think, can we adjust ourselves to be a good fit for that guy or girl and their attempt to rejoin the job market? Can we accommodate their needs and the reasons that they've been left out to date in order to do that? And can we do it while keeping our values. Now, funny thing about values, they have to be flexible because I have to keep the company running. So I can't do things I would like to do which aren't viable financially, even though they are aligned with the values I believed in. Values have to be flexible because they never live by themselves. They live amongst other values. So it's always a trade-off. Yeah. And we play with that trade-off. And that means you need to discuss it all the time because there's no clear answer. It's each case is a discussion.
Man, that's a whole nother podcast episode we could do.
But the second thing is
talking about that. The second thing
is really more substantial, I think, because I don't think you should be necessarily pushing people to succeed more at work. I think you should be pushing them to be happier. And that doesn't always align.
Okay.
I have people who are extremely intelligent doing a horrifically boring and repetitive job, which I would shoot myself in the nostril if I had to do for more than half an hour. But they say my inner self is so in turmoil and excited all the time. I need something that will bore the out of me because everything else is so much turmoil. I need as relaxing and boring as I can get because that's what makes me balanced and happier. And now they can do so much more. And that's always a decision. We have people who, for instance, have psychotic episodes or have had psychotic episodes when they were under too much pressure. And they can move forward. And they want to move forward. Should be, though, because 5 years ago when that happened, they were hospitalized somewhere. And it wasn't with us, but now they want to do it again. Should we? Shouldn't we? And the funny thing is, and the truth of it is, we get it wrong sometimes. And we try and help along people who say that but they shouldn't have been. And sometimes we don't help along people who said, but you should have helped me along a couple of years ago already. It's very difficult. It's people's lives. It's a very difficult call to make when sometimes you can't talk to them about it because they won't give you they'll give you the answer that they want, but not necessarily what's best maybe for them. So we do a lot of thinking about that kind of thing, and there's a lot of discussions, and sometimes you get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong, but at least we try.
The point there, when we move from, and really I appreciate this, I guess, recognition that we should be more aimed at helping people be happy in what they accomplish rather than forcing them to achieve because that's what we think they can do, right? I love that distinction, and I love that perspective. I view this, if we're more empathetic towards people, they're going to end up wanting to achieve more, not out of push and drive, but just because they feel more comfortable. One thing that I mentioned, where I'm at in the studio and I have nature behind me. And I think how much of our society is under pressure because we're no longer getting our hands dirty. I love that. I love going out there and getting my hands dirty. I just want you to stop and just think about that. How much does that come into the world that we're in today? So many industrial jobs, and that could be corporate industrial jobs, that we lose the magic of what we can do with our hands and how that really helps fix some of our problems.
I totally agree, but I think we are so urbanized, many of us, and I have to spend a couple of hours in nature, and I live next to nature, and I do, and that's sort of like my yoga. But some people are so urbanized. I mean, they're running on inside a building on a track that's colored green, and but it's like outside, it's like grass. It's not. It's a colored track. It's not at all, and you're not getting any of the benefits of nature. I totally agree with you, but I think there's something even more fundamental holding us back at work, maybe, and it's this. Ever since I've been a kid and I went to movies, I could always tell the good guys from the bad guys. And apparently I wasn't the only one. Nearly all of us can tell the good guys from the bad guys. And because not because they're wearing white, sometimes they're not, but because they're doing good things. How do we describe doing good things? Maybe as a Jew, I'll quote Jesus in saying, do unto others. And this do unto others is very important. So when you ask people, how would you like to be treated as an individual at work? They'll always say the same thing. All of us, nearly all of us will, with respect. And I'd like to be appreciated. And I'd like to be liked. I'd like to have... That's what we talk about, the emotional side of how we would like to be treated. We always say the same thing. We never say the bad thing. Just like the good guys and the bad guys, it's not difficult to tell them apart. So if we know that from the point where children, being nice to someone is a good thing, belittling someone is a bad thing, being a bully is a bad thing, treating people with kindness is a good thing, don't we? I mean, like most of us, right, know that? How can we forget it the minute we step inside work? Because for some reason, there's so much research going on what people need to feel at work, and I never got it. They want to feel respected and liked and treated as if they're worthy and they have worth. We all do. And if you treat people that way, that's how you'll get the best out of them. That's not what's taught in management. And that's not how corporations operate. They have like wrongdoings, and if someone does a wrongdoing, then you should call them in and reprimand them. And most employees doing a wrongdoing knew they did something wrong. They'll even look around to see if anybody saw them. They didn't do it because they don't care. They did it because something triggered them or they were upset about something. Why not stop reprimanding them and ask them what made them upset? And maybe something triggered them we could help them with so they don't get triggered next time. But the whole attitude towards a boss and employees is so forceful and negative. And I'm going to reprimand you, and I'm going to show you your place, and I'm going to put you through your paces. And why can't you just be nice and caring and respectful, and I'll give you the best I have, I promise, for the long term. And that seems so basic to me, and people aren't clear about it at all. And in fact, I think the most important word, I mentioned it before, is caring. I need people who work with me to feel cared for as individuals, because we want to feel cared for. But caring isn't a managerial word. There's not one iota of research about caring. And you'll have really intelligent organizational psychologists who I respect hugely say, well, it's not a family. You don't have to actually care for people as individuals. Yes, you do. And that's how you get the best out of them, because that's what we were evolved to be. Work amongst family, the tribe, throughout our day, and not go somewhere where nobody knows who we are, doesn't care about us. We come with problems from our home, nobody asked us about them. We go back to them by ourselves. It's a very lonely sort of existence.
You described that, and I mentioned this a little bit in the open, a little bit when we were discussing where, diversity, equality, and inclusion is today. And what you just said, and this is where the picture I can paint, say, for example, an organization, and they're trying to meet their DEI mandate, and we have to have a racial disparity. Well, if there's an executive who's like, I'm just trying to meet a quota, someone can real easily feel like they don't care about me or think I can do my job best. I'm just here to meet a quota. I think that's happening in a lot of organizations. Give me your perspective on that.
Sometimes I have people from abroad create comics for me, because I like to post articles together with comics. And one article I wrote about a blog, sort of like a year ago, I think it was on LinkedIn, it was a one panel of 4 animals. Each one had a corporate goal on his back. One of them, the elephant, was maximum profit. The mouse was diversity. Now, what happens is, and there was a fox and something else, sustainability and whatever. Now, they all start off at the same place, and the finish line is over there. But what happens is, the minute they start running, the elephant, maximum profit, kicks up so much dust that all the others can't see where the finish line is. They start diverting off in the wrong direction because there's so much dust and noise around the maximum profit elephant that it just overcomes everything else, and everybody loses direction because there's one huge major target and lots of little ones. And you can't hurt the big one for the little ones. So people, it's a quota. I need to get the maximum profit targets. This is something I just need a V next to. I have nothing personal. This is noise. I need the maximum profit. And if that's the vibe in the company, which is pretty much the vibe in so many companies, that's what you're going to get. You're not going to get anything else, because that's the main value shouted at. And there'll be a little cough with sustainability, or don't mind, but no, that's not going to be heard. It's not going to be acted upon. And nobody's going to take it that seriously, because obviously the higher ups don't. They want maximum profit first, and hopefully diversity doesn't get in the way.
Well, I love that
approach.
the story, the analogy, the pictures of those, animals and describing that in the dust being kicked up, because I think what's happened in so many organizations from afar and working with people is there's so much time and effort to, devote towards a lot of this training, but it's completely missed of what you're really trying to accomplish. Is you're trying to accomplish maximum profit by having a diverse mindset of individuals, so that way you don't run into the tar pits, you don't run into the mud hole, and there goes all your maximum profit. It's like, have enough perspective to be able to sit up on the rock over the savannah and be able to see what's ahead. Well, that takes a different individual rather than the elephant in the, that's just big and just wants to trot forward. I mean, I see that playing out, and I think that's where it's so broken, is the quotas and the mandates from a profit, but also from an individual's discount everything that's going on, that instead of saying, how can we make sure that we're serving people, we're caring about them, and we're creating a product, a service, whatever it may be, towards our customer, that we can be here today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now. What are we doing, along those lines, that everything gets so short and is like, where are we at based on the stock price this week, this quarter? How are we returning? How are we staying off of the analyst radar because we didn't meet, profit expectations? Instead of saying, look at what's going on. We've had a double interest rate. We've had this world conflict. We've had a lot of other things. We're trying to get through the supply and product management. Why would you expect us to just continue to grow? That's just idiotic. But yet, as you're pointing out, that's the drive from so many executives.
It is. And I think everybody forgets something very, very important. If I'm not mistaken, nearly every public company, the real majority shareholder is the public. Am I mistaken? Because I didn't
I would
do
agree with
economy
that.
at university. I think most of the public has most of the stock, right? So we are the major stockholder. Now that company, who we are the major stockholder of, has a responsibility. And I think, or I fear, that many people who lead companies forgot about it. Maybe actually didn't take the course and never knew about it. But they do have a responsibility, and it's very simple. If there are those in the community who are more difficult to employ, it's possible, and they can be, as good an employee as anybody else, but you have to invest more or different or change in order for that to happen. The mom and pop shop doesn't have either the resources, financially or otherwise, to employ the really hard cases. The bigger the company, the more profitable the company, it's their responsibility to employ those in the community around them who are more difficult to employ. Those companies have IQ resources to figure out how to do that. They have the money in order to do that. If we manage to do it with a few hundred employees and no resources whatsoever, I promise you it's possible. It really, really is. And everybody would earn more money. The companies would earn, everybody would earn more money. But it's a decision that has to be made, and it's a responsibility that has to be held. And it's not. They keep on saying my responsibility is to my shareholders, and I keep on saying, then act appropriately. Because I'm part of your shareholders, and I want everybody in the community working, so we'll all get more money. Why don't you do that? But that's not a responsibility that people own or see. Oh, that's the government should be doing that, not me. No, actually,
I
it's the
would
big
contend
businesses
it's
that should be
everyone.
doing that.
Right? It's not just the government. It's not just the big businesses. It's everyone collaboratively working towards that.
But the bigger you are, the more money you're making,
Absolutely.
the more it's your
Absolutely.
responsibility.
And
Share
that
the
comes
bigger load.
into, being a part of the solution, not the problem. And, again, I've alluded to this a few times, and I want you to walk through it, is, you share in your book, Winning with Underdogs, and I think it's so appropriate in this discussion we've had based upon the corporations and how they have a workforce is, a lot of the equality discussion and trying to include people you describe as having a bouncer at the door of a club. And I'd love for you to just share that with the audience, and we'll dig into that more because I think it's very relevant to what we're seeing in today's world.
Well, let's talk about America and people who have been incarcerated, which is nearly 10% of the adult population, which is 5 or 6 times more than country number 2. I mean, it's so over the top. It's tens of millions of people who have been incarcerated, and they are more than 5 times more unemployed than regular people. Because when you hear someone's been incarcerated, there are trust issues. Why should I get into this at all? And all sorts of stuff like that, right? And what happens is, how does a large corporation know not to hire people who are ex-cons? I mean, there've got to be like hundreds of people in different locations doing the hiring. Was there a memo? Don't think there was a memo. Was there something said? Not even sure there was something said. So that interested me. How did these organizations come together to exclude various populations without really even making it a policy? It's just a natural thing they do. And when I looked into it, it's so subtle, right? I mean, you hire someone who is wrong, your boss will show you that they're less happy. They won't say maybe even why, but that's who you thought you should be choosing. You won't choose that person again, right? And there's so much bias towards people who've been to prison or towards people with disabilities. And I mean, everybody who has a emotional disability has got to be like crazy and dangerous. And everybody's got to, in prison, has got to be like violent and not good to have around. And just we live off those. And we forget that once it's 10% of the population, it's like 30 to 40%. They have family. So you're really excluding something that touches directly 30 to 40% of the population. 15% of the population are people with disabilities. That's even a larger group. But because you have that unmentioned tacit agreement that, we don't want them or those or that. Because when you start the job, you see the people interviewing before you, and for some reason they don't take those people, whoever they are. So why should you? It's apparently not a good thing to do. And it very quickly becomes an unspoken policy. No one's mentioned it, but everybody acts upon it. And I'm saying, you can't talk about inclusion if you have a bouncer at the door. Because what people are saying, no, but look, we've let in an awful lot of people of color. What about ex-cons? No, I haven't let them in yet. So we have a bouncer, right? It's bouncing people of color or ex-cons or people with disabilities or Jews, Christians, Muslims, whoever you want to bounce, but there's someone bouncing. Get rid of the bouncer. Just judge by merit as a policy, as a spoken one, as one you work on keeping. And if you couple that with higher up realizing that they have a responsibility to those in the community who are more difficult to employ, then that could really, really create change. But the same people you need to convince are powerful, strong, and have limited motivation for change. They're good. So many others aren't, but they're good.
Again, I appreciate that. It comes to, we often see when we're chasing profitability is give me the easiest path forward. And we all know that that's never the best way to go through life. It's the hard, the road less traveled that always yields the best results. And when you look at the idea, as you're saying, is once we have a bouncer there, we're excluding someone, then we're going to miss out on something great. And so it's really choosing the hard path, and that's not having a bouncer, and it's finding the people that are maybe a little bit harder to employ, but really looking to say, hey, what different perspective can people bring? That's what's going to benefit our organization the most. I think it's really, it's not having the bouncer, it's coupling, it's where can I go find the perspective that's going to challenge everyone the most, because that's what's going to bring out the best in us. You know, that mindset is so different, but yet I love it and appreciate it, because I think that's when you're going to find the gems that you would have never seen before.
I totally agree. And I think when someone has a very hard time making it, when they eventually do, they're not going anywhere. And if you're the guy that gave them a break, they'll stick with you and they'll give you the best you've got. And our call center is considered maybe the most professional one in Israel, because people stay so much longer than anybody else. They care so much more deeply than anybody else. So the first few months, we're not as good as anybody. Other people, they'll get up to par before us and do really great. And after 6 months, we'll sort of like catch up. And after a year, we'll overtake. And after 5 years, we're so much better. So many people are not willing to pay the price of those first few months, or the price of failing, and then someone comes, well, obviously you failed. You chose the disabled people, people with disabilities, or the ex-cons. Oh, that's why you failed. But if you choose the right star person, poster girl or boy, then nobody will blame you if you get it wrong. So there's so many negative incentives going on, and it makes the world
more. I think, you know, as we've discussed thus far, is, you know, really as you've given the perspective of, you know, I think in so many organizations have gone about diversity, equality, and inclusion as a policy and as a training completely wrong. I think you've given me that perspective. We've talked about that before. I think you've laid it out now, and I think that's where the problem never got really addressed, you know, years ago. It was just kind of like, here's a Band-Aid, this will work. But it's like, no, you're trying to, you know, fix an electrical problem with a plumber. It's not going to work. So I appreciate you sharing so much of that. One thing that I mentioned in the open, and I'd love to take some time now, in you know, as you're in Israel, in the middle of conflict, give me a perspective. You know, as an American friend and an American observer, what's going on is, what is life like, not only within your business, but socially, that I can't see from the outside, that, as I know from being in Israel, I wouldn't see anyways unless you and I were talking about it. So give me that perspective, because I'd love to appreciate it, and I'd love the audience in this time that we have to be able to get the viewpoint from you, instead of having to go to a major news outlet that's going to spin it for their own good.
Well, first of all, let me just, you know, my viewpoint is totally my own. It's not right or wrong. It's just my own personal viewpoint. Personally, I oppose knocking off your neighbors mutually. I don't think that's a good move. I really believe people are people. And once people are people, where they grow up, what they hear, what they're taught, and what they're asked to do has an awful lot of influence on them. The tragic thing about this whole war with Gaza is the same people that did most out. If you take the whole country of Israel and you look to see where is the biggest batch of people who did everything to further peace, who brought children from Gaza into Israel for medical treatments, who went and picketed against Netanyahu and all sorts of other things, those were the kibbutzim around Gaza. Those were the hundreds of people who were raped and slaughtered, and the pictures from the first days, which were not shown in so many places, of 13-year-old girls lying there, shot in the head after they were raped. It's so horrific. There was so much hate, and it was like Middle Ages terror. And it went on for hours. And there are recordings of people calling into Gaza and telling their families how they're raping this Jew and how they're shooting the husband. And the most horrific thing you could think of. And yet, there are people in Gaza and there are people in Israel. Our problem is that they are, in my mind, kidnapped by leaders who are self-serving and don't care whatsoever for the welfare of their populations. And what is difficult for me I wasn't born in Israel, but as someone who's made Israel my home, and 30% of the managers in my call center are Muslim women, and they have relatives in Gaza, and they have family in Gaza, and they have relatives and family in Israel, and there were Muslims who were killed as well in Israel. It causes so much grief and so much upset, and it's so complex. But when I see what goes on in American universities, and I see so many young people walking down the street saying free Palestine, and they can't show me, from the river to the sea, and they don't even know where it is on a map. They don't realize what they're shouting. They're shouting, let's do the Holocaust again, but there are about 2 million Muslims in Israel who consider themselves Israeli. We'll get rid of them as well, and we'll let the rapists, crazy ISIS people keep control and take control. You have so many recordings of the Hamas saying the Gazan people are here to be cannon fodder so we can make our case. There is no responsibility towards the population, and unfortunately, I feel not that different towards leaders, the current leadership in Israel. It's totally skewed and it's controlled by extremists, and you have a prime minister who is doing anything he can to promote what he deeply believes in. And what he deeply believes in is that if he's not leading the country will go down the drain. So anything that will keep him leading the country is the best thing for the country. And that's where the thinking goes. There are no hostages. There are no Gazan children. There are no displaced people from the north and the south. There are no refugees in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. There is Netanyahu leading and surviving, and everything is subservient to that. And once you have leaders there and here with that mindset, without some of those leaders changing or being replaced, the only positive thing I can tell you here is truly I think about 70% of the country in Israel, at least, is where I'm at. Is like we're held hostage and we got to find a way to get out of it. But what I think the public in America doesn't realize is that Hamas is ISIS. And imagine if you're living in Brooklyn and people from Manhattan come over and rape and murder and loot the neighborhood and take 250 civilians with them back into Manhattan, and then put so many rockets inside kindergartens and hospitals, so you're going to be killing so much of their population just to try and stop the firing. I think the world has to notice the difference between placing rockets amongst children and trying to defend civilian populations from rockets fired from amongst children. There is a large difference in values that the world is blind to, and it's blind to because of Israel's lack of presence in any media, social media, strategy-wise. There's nothing going on here. It's extremists and Netanyahu going on here. And that's what you're seeing, and that's what people are believing. And I mean, I know there's an awful lot of hate abroad. I just wish it was aimed in the right place. And it shouldn't be aimed at Israel, and it shouldn't be aimed at Gaza. It should be aimed at leaders who want bloodshed and endless wars. And that's where it should be aimed, not at people who want to live peacefully. Like, I really believe 90% of people
One perspective there that I think parallels is when leaders, it doesn't matter if it's in a Fortune 500 corporate entity, it doesn't matter if it's for a country, they view people as a means to an end. Nothing's going to turn out well. Nothing. And that's what I hear from you, whether we go back to the corporate side of it or we're talking about what's going on from a social national point of view. And I think the mindset of I have to get mine, or I'm trying to protect my own, or I'm trying to serve the highest stakeholder, as opposed to, no, my real responsibility is to everyone in the lowest. You mentioned it as a Jew. It's like, what did Jesus say? Do unto others, right? And whether that's a faith belief or not, or when you start looking at humanity, it's like, it's probably, there's so many different religions that embrace that, right? So many different beliefs that embrace that. They really are, that when we lose sight of it, we really miss what it's all about. And when we miss what it's all about, it becomes such a struggle that the challenge really lies in, how do we move forward and correct it? Because there's no, if it was an easy solution, it'd already be done, right?
I'll tell you. I know, but I think there's something basic.
Yeah.
I think we deserve better. I think Israel and Gaza deserve a better leadership. I think America deserves leaders who are kind, not bullies, not people who are proud of inflicting pain and ridiculing people weaker than them. You can find people who hold the exact views you have who don't behave that way. Why don't you vote for them? And I think it's happening in America as well. And it's happening in Israel. Okay, so he's leading the party I'm for, even though the guy is a horror of a person. That's the guy I'm voting for. Don't vote for the monster. Don't vote for the person who cares not about the people he's supposed to be leading. Even if his views are up your alley, there are many people with views up your alley. Vote for them. But we've lost the ability to say, no, I deserve someone who behaves differently. I want to respect my leaders. I want to respect my president and my prime minister. I used to.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't have all the information, and that's why I used to. But I used to. People were at least pretending to behave.
Yeah.
In any kind of a correct fashion, and that's just gone. And until we realize that we deserve better, and we demand better, and we choose better, and we vote better.
Yeah. Well, and
change.
again, to couple this from a national perspective and a corporate perspective, it's sometimes how you vote is saying, do I continue to work in an environment that devalues people, as opposed to, no, I can choose to work in environments, corporations, entities, or create them as you have, that values people, and let that be the standard so other people can say, no, that's how you do it.
And those companies will earn more, and change is going to come from the bottom. I think it's going to happen in Israel, the next elections. People just have had enough. Hopefully it's going to happen in other places where we choose values and worth and respect over bullying and wars and dissent.
Gil, as we wrap up here, I'd love for you an opportunity to share, where can people learn more about your book, your work, what you're doing every day, CY, all of that stuff. How can they learn more about everything you do?
Well, I have a blog on Psychology Today. It's called Caring Leadership. It's not a great fit for Psychology Today because they're about psychology, and this is more about leadership. But we manage together, and I try and write there once or twice a month, and I post on LinkedIn sometimes, and every now and then I'll have an op-ed somewhere or an article somewhere. But I do think that Most of what I believe in is written in Winning with Underdogs. That's why I wrote the book. I wanted the knowledge out there, and I wanted the perspective out there so people can use it.
Hey, do you figure out what you're great at and do it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to visit again. And for everyone listening, watching this episode, please remember to subscribe on YouTube, hit the little bell so you get notified each new episode. And if you listen to this on either podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure you rate and review it so that way people can find more amazing guests like Gil, learn about them. Thank you so much for your time, and choose to lead with impact.